Hello and warm greetings. Welcome back to the Analyst by Vajiram and Ravi, where we would try to comprehensively analyze 9 articles from the Hindu and the Indian Express, especially from the perspective of UPSC Civil Services examination. The first article is with respect to the concerns associated with the big tech sector and the proposed digital competition bill. The second article is with respect to the issues of solid waste management. The third article is with respect to the serious issue of child trafficking and prostitution. The fourth article is related to the launch of OpenAI's GPT-4o. The fifth article is with respect to the menace of human-wildlife conflict. Finally, we'll have a discussion about some of the very important topics, especially for the upcoming prelims. Now, the very first article is related to the digital competition bill. So there have been concerns associated with the big tech firms. Now we'll look into what these big tech firms are. So it is because of that the Ministry of Corporate Affairs has proposed a new law, that is the digital competition bill, and it tries to regulate these big tech firms. So this deals with the GS2 government policies and interventions and GS3 industrial policy and growth. Coming to the very first aspect of what these big tech firms are. So these are nothing but the largest IT companies. The largest IT companies are the big tech firms. Now, these are also known as GAFA, right? That is, the G stands for Google, A stands for Apple, F stands for Facebook, and A stands for Amazon, right? So what we see is that they have a very dominant market share, and this also includes the Microsoft, right? Now, they have significant market share in their respective domains. For example, when we talk about Google, it has almost 90% share when it comes to the online search engine, right? When we talk about the Apple, it has a huge share when it comes to its own operating system, that is the iOS, right? And also when it comes to the high-end mobile devices. When we talk about the Facebook, so we have its parent company, the Meta. So Meta owns the Facebook, it owns the WhatsApp, and it also owns the Instagram, right? Now, if we talk about Amazon, so Amazon is the leader in the e-commerce domain, and it has also a substantial role when it comes to the cloud computing services through its subsidiary, that is Amazon Web Services, right? So what we see is that these companies have significant market share, and thus they are a dominant force in the technological domain, in the tech domain, right? Now, this raises concerns about the monopolistic practices, because it has been seen that these companies have been adopting those policies which have been restricting the competition and ultimately the user choice, right? Now, what are these monopolistic practices? Let's see. First is the anti-competitive acquisitions. What has been seen is that these companies have acquired smaller potential competitors, right? They have acquired, and once they have acquired, they have ultimately terminated, they have ended the competition itself, right? Now, this leads to reduced innovation, right? And ultimately, it is the end consumer which suffers. Next is, there have been practices of self-preferencing. What do we mean by this? Once you open the Play Store on the Android phone or the App Store, it shows the app which are owned by the Google itself. So there is self-preferencing with respect to these products and services, right? So they are not providing an equitable and equal platform to all the developers. That is with respect to the self-preferencing. Coming to the third part, that is the data advantage. Now, what is this data advantage? See, these companies have huge data with them, have huge users' data with them. And there have been cases where these companies have used this data without the consent of the user, right? And they have used this data for their own benefit, for personalized advertisement, right? For user manipulation, user data manipulation. They have manipulated this data for their own gains, right? Then we have got predatory pricing. How come that these companies are able to have this predatory pricing? See, these companies have large financial clout. That is, they have large financial resources, and on the basis of these large financial resources, what they do is that they offer services, the products and services at relatively cheaper price, which these smaller players cannot do, right? So this is what the predatory pricing is all about. For example, you must have seen that the sales on the Amazon e-commerce platform, right? So the normal retail outlets cannot compete with that, same as with that of Myntra and other service providers. So this is with respect to the predatory pricing. Now, what is the impact? See, impact is that once you have limited the competition, you have made the smaller players out of the market, right? And once they're out of the market, you are reducing the innovation. And ultimately, it is the end consumer who is actually bearing the losses, right? So that is the first thing. Second is it harms consumers as the limited choices are there, as the consumer is not able to avail all the choices on the internet. That leads to a situation where the consumer is forced to buy these products and services from only few players in the market. Then we have got privacy concerns. Now, if these platforms are using the data without the user consent, that creates a situation of privacy infringement, right? And then their data is used for manipulation. Now, these are some of the concerns associated with these big tech firms. Now, what have been the global actions to curb such practices, or let's say what have been the actions taken in India, right? So we'll look into it. If we talk about the global actions to curb such practices, the first is that there are antitrust laws and institutions. Now, what are these antitrust laws and institutions? These are the laws or institutions which prevent anti-competitive practices, which make sure that the trade and commerce is not affected because of these monopolistic practices, right, or unfair trade practices. So that is what we mean by the antitrust laws and institutions. For example, we have got the US Federal Trade Commission, right? For example, the US Department of Justice. So they have been conducting investigations against these big tech firms. Also in European Union, we have some of the implementations of having stringent measures against these big tech firms, and EU has in fact imposed huge penalties on Google, right? Next is with respect to the data privacy regulations. Now, this is in specific reference to the user data, right? So the first and the foremost and the most important aspect with respect to the data privacy regulations is the European Union's GDPR. Now, what is this GDPR? This is General Data Protection Regulations. Now, this serve as the base for protecting the user data, right? And the companies, these big tech companies, they need to acquire the consent, they need to request, they need to have the consent of the user before they can use the data which is offered by different users, right? Now, next is also, and earlier this year, it was the European Union's Digital Markets Act which was implemented. Now, this Digital Market Act has placed severe restrictions on these big tech firms. That is, they have to open their services, right? They cannot restrict their services and they cannot have this self-preferencing. Self-preferencing is not allowed, right? And so that the other third-party apps can also have an equitable platform. So that is what, and it is being said that this India's proposed digital competition bill has been inspired from the European Union's Digital Market Act, right? Now, if we go into what has been the framework with respect to the competition in India, so we have this Competition Act of 2002. Now, this was actually enacted to have a framework where the anti-competitive practices can be prevented, right? So we have the Competition Commission of India, which has been set up under this Competition Act, right? This provides that such practices should not take place if any corporation or entity is following monopolistic practices or any practice which is sort of hampering the trade, which is not justified, then this Competition Commission of India can take suitable actions. Now, what needs to be kept in mind? That this Competition Commission of India follows an ex post antitrust framework. What do we mean by that? Let's say a particular entity is there, right? And that entity has already committed an sort of anti-competitive practice, right? Now, it is after this instance has taken place that Competition Commission of India can actually regulate it and impose penalties, right? So, imposing penalties after the act has already been taken place, that is what known as the ex post antitrust framework, right? Now, the most important part of the proposed digital bill, that is the draft digital competition bill, is that it follows an ex ante framework. What do we mean by this? See, what it says is that there needs to be regulations before the act of anti-competitive, before any anti-competitive act takes place by a particular entity, right? So it is based on the reports, it is based on the findings that if the commission, if the Competition Commission of India feels that this particular entity is indulging itself in anti-competitive practices, in monopolistic practices, in predatory pricing, in self-preferencing, then it can impose sort of preventive restrictions. That is what the most important part of this bill is all about. So as I said, it incorporates predictive regulations. That is based on that just before the market abuse takes place, the Competition Commission of India imposes penalties. That is what the predictive regulations is all about. That is, it is presumptive, right? So remember this. Now coming to the concept of these significant entities, one of the most important clauses in this bill is about the SSDE. What is this SSDE? It means the systematically significant digital enterprises. So you have the systematically significant digital enterprises. Now what are these enterprises? See, what has been said in this proposed bill is that Competition Commission of India can designate any big tech firm as SSG, right, on the basis of few parameters. For example, its user base or its market influence, okay, or any parameter, right? If the Competition Commission of India feels that this particular entity has a large user base or it has a large turnover, so it can actually impose a lot of restrictions on these entities. What you need to keep in mind is that it's not just these parameters which are to be followed. It has been said in the bill that even if the Competition Commission of India feels that a particular entity is not fulfilling these criteria, it can even declare such entity as SSG. And those SSGs are actually, they have been regulated to such an extent that they have been asked that they cannot do such anti-competitive practices. They cannot indulge in self-preferencing. Moreover, they actually have to open their platforms for third-party apps. That is, they have to provide an equal platform. They cannot sort of give priority to their own apps, right? So these are what the SSGs are actually regulated. Now, it has been said that if they don't follow these instructions by the Competition Commission of India, then penalties can be imposed up to the tune of 10% of their global turnover, right? Now, this is one of the very important aspects. Coming to the third aspect, that is the associate digital enterprises. What do we mean by this? See, let's say you have Google Maps. Try to understand. Let's say you have Google Maps. Now, this is the subsidiary of Google. What it says is that if you have a particular entity of a larger group, right, and that is helping the larger group in providing these services, then that particular entity can also be termed as associate digital entity. For example, we can also see that we have YouTube. So YouTube can also be declared as associate digital entity of Google, right? And they can be subjected to the same provisions as they're applicable to the systematically significant digital enterprises. So these are some of the very important provisions with respect to the proposed digital competition bill. Now, naturally, we have got a lot of criticism against this proposed bill. Now, what are these criticism? See, first is that these big tech companies, they're saying that why have you adopted a sort of ex-ante framework, right? Why can't you just continue that ex-post framework, right? Let's say you regulate us, and if we do something wrong, then penalize us. Why you are having this framework where you first wait and see, and then you impose sort of conditions on us, and we are then not able to focus upon core business activities. So that is one of the concerns raised by the big techs. Second is that they are saying, the big tech firms are saying that it would shift focus from innovation and research. According to them, a lot of financial resources would have to be diverted in order to make sure that anti-competitive practices don't take place, right? So this is the concern with respect to the big tech firms. Next is that, see, you must have seen that in the mobile gadgets of Apple, you really don't have that space, that liberty to download other apps. So there are firms like Apple and even the Google who are saying that if you allow downloading of apps, that is the third party apps, it may compromise the security of that particular mobile, right? So they're not in favor of having this equitable field. They're saying that we would stick to our own sort of conditions, and thus there's a tussle between the proposed bill and these big tech firms. Next is the condition, the clause that gives the power to the Competition Commission of India to declare any entity as SSG, even if it doesn't fulfills the conditions of these parameters of SSD. So they're saying that you are giving this arbitrary power to the Competition Commission of India, and it is not justified, right? Next is that it can restrict data sharing. See, understand. Howsoever you have doubts against the big tech firms, but please understand that many MSMEs or many small enterprises have benefited a lot because of the data sharing which these companies are doing, right? So what we see is they're saying that this can restrict the data sharing, and ultimately it would affect these small players, right? It would affect these small players, right? Now, what should be the way forward? See, very simple. That first you need to provide adequate space in the technological domain to the new entrants, so that the large companies don't take all the share, right? They don't just eat all the cake, right? Adequate space has to be provided in terms of having sort of regulated structure. That is, that we need to follow this acts and framework so that it can provide the opportunity for the small players to establish in the market and to have sort of innovative products and services, right? That is the first thing. The next aspect is that these regulations, it should be made sure that these regulations should not end the benefits of the smaller player. A lot of these smaller players have been benefiting from the online advertising. So if you curb the data sharing, there can be a sort of a situation where the smaller players are affected. So it should be made sure that these regulations are not actually hampering these smaller players. Next is the innovation and the R&D should not be compromised. Please understand that innovation is the backbone of technological domain, right? So if you have no innovation, the technological domain would just lapse, right? So what you need to make sure is that the regulations should balance with the innovation need, right? That is the first aspect. Finally, see, we have this proposal in India, and similarly, we had this proposal in the EU, as we talked about, the EU's Digital Market Act. See, these technology, they don't see the boundaries, right? And they cover the whole world. So what we need to have is a global consensus. There needs to be a consensus among different countries around the world that we need to have this architecture so that a uniform policy mechanism can be applied to all the companies around the world, right? It should not be restricted to particular regions, right? Let's say India is making its own law, EU is making its own law. So that should be the way forward. So what we see is that regulations must be in place, but it should not be like these regulations should not hamper the innovation in this particular domain by these big tech firms. So that should be the way forward. Now, coming to, just before switching to the next article, I have a question for the mains. That is, the first is, what are the different challenges posed by the big tech? How does the proposed digital competition bill aims to rectify such challenges? So do write an answer of about 150 words. Now, coming to a question of 2019. And why I have highlighted this question here is because of the importance of such questions, of such domains in the UPSC. So it was in 2019 that this question was asked: which of the following adopted a law on the data protection and privacy for its citizens known as General Data Protection Regulations in April 2016 and started implementation of it from 25th of May 2018. So just find the answer and post it on the comment section. So coming to the next article, we have the solid waste management. So recently, the Supreme Court has criticized the way the solid waste is being managed in the National Capital Region. So it concerns with GS3 environment issues and the GS2 government interventions. So let's talk about the solid waste management. So what it refers to is the entire series of steps which are used to handle the garbage, the trash, right? So it consists of multiple steps. For example, collection. That is, the waste is collected from the homes. It is first segregated, and then it is then collected from the homes or the industries. Then it involves the transportation. What it means is that then that particular waste is transported for the treatment or at the disposal site. Then we have got the treatment. This treatment includes sort of the step of recycling so that it can be reused. The waste can be reused. Then it can also include composting, where the waste is actually used to have sort of a nutrient-rich compost, which can be used then in the agriculture. Then we have got the waste to energy plants, where these wastes can be incinerated, they can be burnt, and energy can be produced, and then that can be converted into electricity. So these are the treatment steps. Then we have the final step, that is with respect to the disposal. So what happens in disposal is that the unprocessed waste is then taken to the landfills. So ideally, these landfills need to be managed and engineered in a proper way, right? So there needs to be a proper engineered and managed framework for these landfills. Now, talking about the legal framework which India has with respect to the municipal solid waste, the solid waste. So what is that? So at the base lies the Environment Protection Act of 1986. Now what it does is that it empowers the central government to issue rules, right? So that the proper handling of the waste can take place. Then it also establishes the principles of these waste management, so that the waste management does not lead to so that it can minimize the risk with respect to the environment and also public health, right? So it also gives the principles. Now coming to the next rule, which is that of the Municipal Solid Rules of 2000. So it was in the year 2000, after the ruling of the Supreme Court, that the government of India had to frame certain rules. Now this gave the national framework with respect to the solid waste management, right? Now some of the key aspects with respect to this Municipal Solid Waste Rules of 2000 were the composting, right? That is using this waste and then converting into nutrient rich compost that can be ultimately used in the agriculture. Then it also included the recycling, that is the waste should be recycled and it can be reused, so that the virtuous cycle takes place. And then we have the landfill management also. So a proper scientific landfill management needs to be there. So these were the key aspects which were related to the municipal solid waste. Now coming to 2016, the municipal solid waste rules of 2000 were replaced by the solid waste management rules of 2016. Now they actually prioritize three things, that is reuse, reduce and recycle. So it prioritized three things: reuse, reduce and recycle. That is the 3R concept. It also mandated a specific sort of segregation. Now what do we mean by this? It said that the waste should be segregated into three components. The first should be biodegradable waste, that is which includes the food, right, or the garden waste. Then the second was with respect to the non-biodegradable, which includes the metals or plastic. Then finally the third was with respect to the hazardous waste, which can include sort of the chemicals or batteries or medical waste. So it mandatorily said that you need to have a sort of a segregation into three components. Finally, it also incorporated the principle of producer responsibility. Now this is something very important and we are familiar with, especially in context of the e-waste rules, right? So what does it mean is that if you have sort of a producer responsibility, it mandates that the producer of the waste, that is the person who has generated that particular waste, is responsible for collecting it back. He is liable for collecting that particular trash back. So that is what we mean by producer responsibility. So this principle was incorporated in this solid waste management rules. Now coming to the enforcement mechanism, what are the enforcement mechanisms which are in place? So as far as the sort of supervision of these rules is concerned, we have the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change and the Central Pollution Control Board, which has this responsibility to issue and to supervise these rules are to see whether these implementation is being taken care effectively or not. Coming to the state pollution control boards, ultimately at the state level, the enforcement lies with these state pollution control boards. The enforcement power lies with these state pollution control boards. Now, what is the role of NGT? See, if you have issues with respect to if you have complaints with respect to the improper handling of these waste, there have been complaints which have been filed in the NGT, and NGT has a lot of time given proper solutions, has asked even the center government and the state governments to have a sort of a proper framework. Now, this article in particular, which we are discussing, it gives us certain data, and it primarily focuses on the national capital, right? Now this data is important. We can quote it in our answers also. So we'll look into this data and see what are the findings. So what it says is that the estimated population as of now of the national capital is 2.32 crores. Right. And if we assume that every person generates around 0.6 kgs of waste per day, then it cumulatively accounts to 13,000 tons per day of waste, right? And if we add the sort of in a year, we would get 42 lakh tons of waste produced in a year, right? And this amount, since the population is going to rise, and the report has estimated, the article says that by 2031, the population of Delhi would be 2.85 crore, and it would then generate a cumulative waste of 17,000 tons per day. Right. Now, the issue is that the waste composition with respect to this national capital is diversified. It is not uniform, and 50 to 55% it contains the biodegradable waste, 35% has non-biodegradable waste, and 10% of it is inert. Now, what the article says is that as of now, the processing capacity of the national capital is just 9,200 tons per day. And what is the amount that the national capital is generating? That is 13,000. So the rest, that is around 3,800, it is unprocessed and it is then sent to the landfills. Right. Now, this once it is sent to the landfills. Now, primarily, Delhi has 3 landfills. One at as Ghazipur, the second at Balsawa, and the third at Okhla. So, Ghazipur, Balsawa, and Okhla. So, primarily at these 3 landfills, the waste is then sent. The unprocessed waste. Now, once you send the unprocessed wastes, it affects the environment badly. Why? Because once this unprocessed waste goes to landfill, it releases CH4, methane. It produces leachates. Now, these are the substances, the semi-liquid substance which peeps it into the groundwater, which percolates down in the groundwater, and then it affects the groundwater very badly, right? So, the decontamination of water takes place. Then also, you have the issue with respect to the landfill fires. So, a lot of times, huge fires take place because of the prevalence of methane gas in the landfills. Now, what the article says is that because of such unprocessed waste being accumulated at these landfills, a total 2.58 crore tons of legacy waste has been accumulated at these landfills. Now, this is too much, humongous. So, what this article highlights is that we have laws in place, but there is sort of not adequate implementation, right? So, we need to have sort of proper implementation. Now, what are the challenges with respect to tackling waste in India? The general challenges. See, once we talk about the urban areas, right, the municipal areas, there is lack of waste segregation at source. Even in our homes, we fail to segregate the waste as liquid waste or organic waste or inorganic waste. That is one of the important concerns, and ultimately it increases the unprocessed waste, and that goes to the landfill. Second is that there is limited land for waste processing. See, ideally, the land processing facility requires sort of 30 to 35 acres of land. Now, in Delhi, you can't even imagine having such a large space, right? So, there is lack of space, and which actually prevents proper sort of handling of such solid waste. Third is that there is lack of public awareness with respect to proper waste management. And ultimately, what it happens is that it leads to littering around, right? And also, unprocessed waste is thrown around. You can just see in the image on the roads, everywhere we go, we find such kind of scenes in front of us. So that is something which is not good. Then there is lack of regular and timely collection by these authorities. See, once you will not have a regular and timely collection of the waste would get piled up. And even in the areas where you should not ideally throw the waste, people would throw the waste in the open areas. So for example, just see in the image that you have a road and then you have the waste on the road. Now this is an open space. Ideally, no waste should be here. But once you don't have sort of regular collection, this situation happens. Next is there is lack of coordination among the stakeholders. You have different stakeholders. You have the municipal corporations, you have the other agencies, the private agencies responsible. There is lack of coordination, right? There are also jurisdiction issues. So because of all these sort of mismatch, we have the condition where the coordination doesn't take place, and ultimately we have got the waste all around the roads and everywhere. Now, what should be the way forward? See, coming to the way forward aspect, the first thing is that as we know that the population is going to increase, we need to enhance the processing capacity. The processing capacity needs to be scaled up, considering thinking that we need to have 18,000 tons per day capacity, right? So after a few years, we would require 18,000 tons per day processing capacity. So accordingly, we need to invest, we need to have financial resources sort of allocated for the design and setting up of these processing plants. Next is that the biodegradable waste need to be converted to biogas. We can have decentralized plants, right? So that these biodegradable waste can be converted into biogas. Now, you have got two benefits. First is that you will have sort of an energy source, right? Second is that you can have your agriculture more productive. You can enhance the productivity of agriculture by using the compost generated out of this process of generating the biogas. These are the two aspects. And it needs to be kept in mind that just the neighbors of Delhi, that is Haryana and UP, they're agriculture states. So you have good markets also, right? Coming to the next aspect, that we can have a sort of decentralized waste processing. So we can have sort of micro composting centers, right? And this has been implemented in the states of Tamil Nadu and Kerala. So at the level of wards, you have these facilities where the composts are generated and they're ready to sell in the market, and sort of they're decentralized, right? Also, there are dry waste collection centers in Bengaluru, which have been set up, decentralized model, right? So it also enhances the waste processing, and it also leads to a situation where this dry waste can be used for waste to energy generation. Next is that technology institutions. We have got some of the very best institutions in the national capital. Those research institutions need to be incentivized so that they can come out with solutions which are both effective and economical, right? So what we see is that this is definitely a very serious problem. We need to have sort of these strategies in place so that this issue of solid waste can be resolved. Coming to the next article, we have the child trafficking and the prostitution. So recently in Arunachal Pradesh, several people have been arrested, including a cop, including a government official. So this highlights the grave issue with respect to the child trafficking and prostitution. It deals with the GS2 social issues and vulnerable sections. Now, what we see is how we define what is child trafficking and prostitution. So it is a heinous crime which actually exploits the vulnerable children, right? Those children who are already vulnerable, it exploits it, right? Next, we have the difference. What is the difference between child trafficking and the prostitution? See, child trafficking is a broad term. It's a broad term which includes the act and means of leading to an exploitative situation for that particular child, right? And once this situation leads to a condition where the child is forced for prostitution, it leads to sort of child prostitution. So one of the results of the child trafficking can be child prostitution. Now, this is a very serious issue in the society, and the exact numbers of the victims are unknown because this act of child trafficking takes place very secretively. So you really don't know what is the real number, right? But according to the NCRB data in the year 2021, there were around 4,000 cases which were registered, which were related to the trafficking, and out of these, 1,500 were related to those people who were under the age of 18 years, right? So this is a very small number, and it is very small in comparison to the real numbers, right? Now, what is the legal framework or the constitutional framework with respect to the child trafficking and prostitution? So we have got the very important article which the Constitution of India has, which is the Article 23. Now this prohibits traffic in human beings and forced labor, right? Then we have got the Immoral Traffic Prevention Act. Now this criminalizes the act, those act of trafficking which involves exploitation, right? It also provides for rescue, rehabilitation, right? Rescue, rehabilitation and reintegration in the society. Then we have got the sections of the IPC, Indian Penal Code, that is from section 370 to 373. It includes sort of those provisions which deals with the buying or selling of minors for trafficking, right? So this is what these sections talk about. It also talks about the other exploitative practices. Coming to the next act, which is Protection of Children from Sexual Offences Act of 2012. Now this is a very stringent law, and it provides sort of very harsh punishment for in cases where the child is subjected to sexual harassment, right? So that is what the POCSO is all about. Next, we have got the Juvenile Justice Care and Protection of Children Act. Now this provides the care of children in need. Now need can be this situation of child trafficking. It also provides sort of rehabilitation to the victims of child prostitution, of child trafficking, right? So we have got a very stringent sort of legal framework, but there are issues with respect to the implementation part. Now, what are the causes of child trafficking and prostitution? See, understand that we still have a lot of poverty in India, and extreme poverty in some cases forces the family to actually sell their child. Yes, this is a reality. In some situations, the families are forced to sort of sell their child. Also, some very small minors, they're forced to travel to urban areas for employment, and over there they are subject to the vulnerabilities. They become subject to the vulnerabilities, different vulnerabilities, and the traffickers find them, and then they can sort of employ the exploitative practices and ultimately traffic that particular child. Then we have got lack of education and awareness with respect to the child rights. Families are not aware, childs themselves are not aware. So what it leads to that ultimately we are unable to curb such practices. Then there is demand for cheap labor. See, there are different industries. For example, agriculture. For example, domestic work. Right. For example, begging. So these children are actually exploited in these industries, and ultimately it can result into child prostitution also. Then see, we have got a very sad situation in India, and still now, that we have sort of gender inequality and social norms. There is entrenched a very strong sort of patriarchal mindset, right, and which actually makes the girls sort of more vulnerable to these sort of exploitative practices, and they're more susceptible to such child prostitution, right. Then we have got the broken families. It has been found that those families which are broken, or the children from the orphanages, they are more prone to the child trafficking and prostitution. So these are some of the reasons for this trafficking and prostitution. Now, what should be the solutions? See, as I said, India already has very good laws, robust laws in place. However, there is lack of implementation. So there needs to be a robust implementation with respect to these laws, right. So we had a lot of laws, right, Article 23, and then Immoral Traffic Prevention Act, the POXCO, the IPC sections. So what we need to have the effective implementation of these laws, and we need to make sure that there is an inclusion of harsher punishments so that it acts as a deterrent, right. So that is one thing. Next is that we need to strengthen the child protection services. For example, the helplines, right. For example, we need to provide sort of safe shelters. So these are some of the services which the government should work. They're already doing it, but they should enhance the scope of these services. Then we need to have community awareness programs. Community is itself not aware about the child rights, so they're not aware about these things happen, right. So we need to make sure that they understand the importance of such issue, right, in handling such issue. And there needs to be a proper mechanism where the suspected cases, the community can report suspected cases, right. That is one of the aspects. Then what ultimately we need to, as we said, that the girls are more susceptible. So we need to have a mechanism where we empower the women and the girls, right. How we can do so? Through education, through skill development, through vocational training, right, providing the employment opportunities, that is livelihoods. So through different mechanisms, we need to make sure that the girls are educated, they're made independent, and ultimately they should be aware of their rights, and they should be in a position to earn their own finances, and ultimately it leads to a situation where such practices don't occur. Then we have got the need of the collaboration and rehabilitation. So we have got a number of stakeholders. We have got the police, we have got the social workers, right? We have got the non-governmental organizations, right? So all these stakeholders, different stakeholders need to come together. They need to evolve a sort of coherent strategy, and only then we can make sure that such practices don't occur, and our children are all safe and secure. Now, coming to the next article, we have this buzzword of artificial intelligence, and again we keep on hearing about the new launches of the different models. So we have recently we had this launch of OpenAI's GPT-4o. We look into what AI is all about and what this model is all about. So as I said, the OpenAI introduced its latest large language model. We look what LLMs are all about, called GPT-4o, billing it as the fastest and the most powerful AI model so far. Now this concerns with GS3 science and technology. Now, coming to the very basic concept of artificial intelligence. What is artificial intelligence all about? See, artificial intelligence is nothing but the simulation of human mind, of human intelligence. If machines are able to act in a way the humans do, that is artificial intelligence. Now, this concept, we think so it's very new, but if you analyze, you'll see that this concept goes back to the time of 1950s, when it was Alan Turing who actually started this concept, started studies on this concept, right? So as the name says, artificial, says not real. So once you have these machines having the intelligence of humans, so we have this concept of artificial intelligence. Now these have wide applications. These are being implemented on a wide scale as of now. First is the recommendation system. As soon as you open your YouTube, you have those videos which you like. The preference, your preferences are made the basis. How is that possible? It is based on sort of algorithms. Now, what are algorithms? Algorithms. So these algorithms are nothing but the series of steps. So this is series of steps which a particular program follows, right? A particular computer program follows. That is algorithm. So once you have this YouTube, for example, once you open your YouTube, or you open the Netflix, or you open the Amazon sort of Prime, you have got videos which are based on your own interest, right? Then we have got interaction via human speech. You must have used the Google Assistant, or the Amazon's Alexa, right? Or the Apple Siri. These are nothing but the sort of interaction via the human speech, and they use the artificial intelligence model. Then we have got the autonomous vehicles. For example, Waymo, the Google's self-driving car project. Now it employs the artificial intelligence concept. Then we have got strategy games such as Go and chess. These employ artificial intelligence. Then we have got generative tools. Ultimately, we are coming to the topic of our discussion, that is generative tools. What happens is that you basically sort of give a sort of an input, and the machine, on the basis of its analysis, it carries out sort of a proper data analysis, and then it gives you a particular result, right? And that is a text or something that is based on generative AI, right? Now, see, if you need to understand what is generative AI, you need to first understand the concept of machine learning, right? Now, what is machine learning? See, you have a particular machine, that is a computer. So the constant and the continuous learning of that particular machine, how the machine learns, it is based on the data feed, the data which you feed into the machine. So once you feed the data into the machine, what happens is that the machine constantly learns the data, right? On the basis of algorithm, that is that particular series of steps. And then once you give a lot of data to the machine, and then you ask a particular question, the machine analyzes that particular question, and on the basis of the learning it had, on the basis of the data, it gives you an answer. Now, please understand, the more the data you give to the machine, right? And the more processing takes place. So you have more the data you are giving to the machine, more the processing takes place, more accurate would be the response by the machine. That is what the machine learning is all about. Now, this machine learning uses some of the sort of processes, uses a particular process, and that is based on the large language models, right? Now, first understand what is language model. See, this is nothing but a probabilistic natural language model. What do we mean by this? Let's say you have this concept of optical character recognition, right? Or normal translation, language translation. So that language translation takes place on the basis of this language model. Once you have these language models, which are very much sort of advanced, and which are very much intense, that leads to sort of large language models, right? Understand that these large language models are based on artificial neural networks. What do we mean by artificial neural networks? See, neural is something which is related to the mind, the brain. So it mimics the human intelligence. It works in the way the human brain works. That is what the large language model also does, right? So if we see that these sort of generative tools, such as the Chat GPT or the Gemini, they are using these large language models in order to create new products, right? That's the reason we come to know about different products almost sort of at a specific frequency, right? Now, what is GPT in the Chat GPT? It is generative pre-trained transformer. Now, what is this? This is nothing but large language model. A particular large language model is known as GPT, right? Now, coming to this discovery, or sorry, this sort of launch of the new product. This is the GPT-4o. The word O implies is omni. Why the company use this word omni? See, this is seen as a revolutionary AI. I'll come to that answer. I'll come to the discussion why we have this word omni. This is seen as a sort of a revolutionary AI model. Why? Because it has enhanced the human and computer interactions to a newer level, right? We already had, the beginning from the ChatGPT, the basic version, and the other AI models. But now what is happening is that you have advanced the interactions to such a level that now there can be different inputs, right? It is now becoming multimodal. You can have a text as an input, you can have an audio as an input, you can have an image as an input in this particular GPT 4o, right? That is the reason it is known as Omni. That is everywhere, right? Now, it is acting as, it has a capacity to act as a digital personal assistant. What do we mean by that? It can assist you in day-to-day routine tasks. It can carry out the real-time translations of languages. It can have a real-time conversation with you. That is what the beauty of this particular product is. Then it understands inputs more holistically. What do we mean by this? See, it's not just the speech which you are saying to this particular machine. It also understands the background noise. It also understands the emotional sort of construct which your voice has. That is the beauty of this GPT 4o. Then the speed and the efficiency part is also good. So the machine, according to the company, it's saying that it has a sort of a response time of 232 to 320 milliseconds. So that you first prompt, you submit an input and it gives you an answer, right? Now this is as same as a human can do, right? So you are actually reaching to that level of human intelligence. Now, obviously it's a machine, so it can't do everything. So what it can't do, see, you can submit, you can make an input through a sort of a text, an audio, an image, right? But what it can't do is it cannot generate a particular video, right? You can use your smartphone for to have this AI in order to know what kind of environment you are standing in, right? It can tell you, but this AI model cannot still generate the videos. Second is that while you were having the demonstration of this particular model, there were some errors, right? Let's say a particular image was asked to sort of make an image, and that image was sort of, it looked like an AI generated image. What I mean to say is it didn't look like a real image. But after sort of trials, ultimately it led to sort of an image which looked real. But yes, it has some errors, right? Now, what are the safeguards? See, please understand that you can, let's say, a particular machine can have sort of a cyber attack done. Now you don't know that whether this is a machine or an entity or an individual or what, right? So we live in an era of misinformation and disinformation, right? Propaganda can be carried out. So the company says that there are built-in safety mechanisms in this particular design. For example, we have got sort of the design related to refined models in place. There are filtering mechanisms in place. So on the basis of these filtering mechanisms and refined model, the company is saying that the users won't be able to sort of misuse this particular platform. Then there is a team of 70 experts which are from different fields such as social psychology, from bias, fairness and misinformation, who have got good knowledge about these particular aspects. So they have been made to come as a part of this team, and they raise the red flags whenever the machine has some of the concerns or some information which can be misused. So they raise the red flags. This is what the company is trying to do on its own. Now, in general, if we talk about what are the challenges associated with the AI, in general, see, understand that these AI applications require huge amount of computational power. So it is sort of, if you are using a lot of energy resources, the environment gets affected. It also leads to the generation of e-waste. That is the first concern. Second is it could lead to significant loss of employment. Once you have the machines doing the task of sort of normal people, so not just redundant tasks, but also those tasks which require human intelligence, it can lead to sort of a huge loss of employment. Then it could deepen socio-economic disparity. Please understand that at two fronts, we have this crisis. First, between the large MNCs and small startups, and between the developed and developing countries. So see, understand that most of this technology progress which is going on in the AI domain, it is going in the large MNCs, right? The small startups are not able to match to the expertise, to the financial resources which these large MNCs have. Second, the developed countries, most of these developments which are taking in the AI, they are taking place in the developed countries and not in the developing countries. So there is a disparity. And if this continues, the disparity would increase. Next is we have got new security concerns. New forms of cyber vulnerabilities have come. New forms of cyber attacks can come. As I said, we don't know whether this is a particular machine or an individual who has actually started this particular cyber attack. Then it is being said that humans are being over dependent on these machines. We know that people just go and use ChatGPT for having their content. So what is being said is that it can lead to a loss of basic skills and understanding, that what it can lead to. More serious is that there have been sort of people who have said that the full development, for example, Stephen Hawking, late scientist Stephen Hawking, said in an interview in 2014 that the full development of AI can spell the end of human race. What it means is that if it can reach to a situation where the intelligence of the machines, it overpasses that of the humans, and it can eventually lead to a situation where the existence of human is itself in dangers. So once the machine outperforms the humans, that is what we reach to this situation, and this is obviously not something which is acceptable or good. Now what should be the way forward? Coming to the way forward, see, what we need to have is a global consensus for regulation, right? This is something, as we discussed in the earlier article with respect to the big tech, AI is something which doesn't care about the boundaries among the nations. What we need to have a global consensus so that a proper framework can be created and all countries can get on the board and all the MNCs can get on the board, and a proper ethical sort of framework can be created with respect to the AI. Then the government should partner with the private sector. Understand that especially in context of the developing and the least developed countries, the private sector doesn't have the resources. So especially the governments in the least developed countries and the developing countries need to provide adequate resources to the private sector so they can compete with those of the developed countries, right? Those private entities of the developed countries, and this socio-economic disparity can sort of be narrowed down. Coming to the next aspect, we need to have provisions for continuous skilling and upskilling. See, AI field is something which is very much specific to a particular skill, right? So if you don't have people which are sort of skilled in that particular domain, you really cannot optimize or utilize the AI for the benefit of the country at large, right? So we need to skill people, we need to upskill them. Their skill needs to be enhanced so that they can actually sort of work in this particular domain, the AI domain, and also contribute for the benefit of the nation. So what we need to have is a sort of a multi-pronged approach, and if we employ these approaches, definitely we can use the AI for the common good and for a human-oriented development. Now coming to the next article, we have that of the human-wildlife conflict. So recent death of a particular tribal in the state of Tamil Nadu has raised concerns because that particular tribe has had a good sort of coexistence with the elephants of that particular area. But this again points out to the grave concern with respect to the human-wildlife sort of conflict. Now this concerns with the social sector and sort of the environment also. Now coming to the human-wildlife conflict, what is human-wildlife conflict? So if you go by the definition of World Wildlife Fund, you would see that when the encounters between the man and the humans lead to a situation which has disastrous negative result, that it can lead to a loss of life, also loss of property, loss of livelihood. So once you have a loss of life or property or livelihoods, that result that can be termed as sort of a human-wildlife conflict. Now this has reached to alarming levels. Why? Because this particular human-wildlife conflict has been witnessed in almost all these states. For example, in 2021, Maharashtra witnessed 86 deaths because of human-wildlife conflict, and this number shot up to 105 in 2022. Right. So this is something which is not good, and proper strategies should be there so that these conflicts can be minimized. Now, what are the causes for such human-wildlife conflict? See, there has been a growing human as well as animal population, and this leads to overlap of their common areas, right? Overlap of their areas. So they try to infringe into each other's boundaries, and that results into more interactions between the humans and the wildlife, leading to more conflicts. Second is the habitat fragmentation. For specific activities like mining, for agricultural expansion, habitat fragmentation has been taking place, and thus you are more encroaching into the humans are more encroaching into the sort of domain of these wildlife, and ultimately leading to an increase in the human wildlife conflict. Next is changing cropping patterns. We have, especially after the green revolution, we have shifted to the sort of concept of monoculture, right? And it is actually attracting a lot of animals. For example, elephants are being attracted to particular fields, right? And once you have got humans there, once the humans retaliate, you have this condition of human wildlife conflict, right? Then you have this this reason of invasive alien species. Once a particular invasive alien species, for example, let's say a plant, once a particular invasive plant species, it spreads into this area, it destroys the native sort of plants, which has been the food for the animals. Then the animals have to go to sort of other areas, and then it leads to interaction, greater interactions with the humans, ultimately leading to the conflict. Then you have got the many areas which remain unprotected. See, definitely India has a lot of protected areas, the national parks, the wildlife sanctuaries. But what needs to be kept in mind that we have got certain areas, for example, 70% of areas of elephant range, right? 40% of lion range, and almost 35% of tiger range. It is outside the ambit of the protected areas. Thus, obviously, greater interactions would take place, and this human wildlife conflict takes place. Now, what are the solutions to mitigate such human wildlife conflicts? First is habitat conservation and corridor development. You need to protect the already established the protected areas, the wildlife corridors, right? A proper wildlife corridors need to be constructed so that the fragmented lands can be joined and the animals can freely have access to both the areas, right? It would also reduce competition among different species, and it would also lead to a condition where the animals, they don't sort of have an interaction, an antagonistic relation with the humans, right? Then we need to have early warning system. What do we mean by this? Technology needs to be used, right? In terms of having sort of radio collars on the animals, right? So as soon as a particular sort of an animal come closer to the human habitation, SMS alerts can be sent, right? And then the community can take precautions. Or you can have certain other measures, for example, having early detection systems, right? So these are some of the systems which need to be in place so that which we can mitigate the human wildlife conflict. Next is by deterrence and buffers. What do we mean by this deterrence? So if you have a boundary which is of sort of chili fence, right, or light, if you've just flashed the light, right, or you have beehives, these act as deterrent and animals don't cross that particular boundary, right? What do you mean by buffers? So if you just plant trees which are unpalatable, right, which animals don't eat, so that they won't actually cross that particular area. So this is with respect to the buffers. Now, what we need to do is we need to have a proper community engagement. A proper community engagement needs to be there, right? So that the people on the ground understand the animal behavior, right? And they so that they develop the conservation, the coexistence strategies. So coexistence strategies need to be in place, and a proper awareness mechanisms need to be developed so that the people, the local people, can be taught about the wildlife behavior, right, and how they should respond to that particular situation. Then livelihood diversification needs to take place. See, we already know that there is sort of disguised unemployment, and we have got more people in the agriculture sector. So people need to be given adequate sort of skills. The skills need to be enhanced, vocational training needs to be given, education needs to be given, so that you can actually make people to go work in the other sectors, right? So that is what livelihood diversification is required. So if we have this a mix of these strategies, we can definitely minimize this sort of human wildlife conflict, and we can mitigate this particular aspect. So coming to the prelims snippet sections, now these articles have come in the newspaper and they can be very important for your upcoming prelims. So let's look into the individual articles. So the first topic is about the Indian Meteorological Department. So the Indian Meteorological Department it works under the overall supervision of the Ministry of Earth Sciences, Government of India, and it is a principal agency for meteorological observations, weather forecasting and seismology. It also studies the seismic activity. Now it is headquartered in Delhi, and the regional offices are in Chennai, Mumbai, Kolkata, Nagpur and Guwahati. IMD is also one of the 6 regional specialized monitoring centers of the World Meteorological Organization. So you have got 6 regional specialized monitoring centers around the world, and IMD is one of them. Now it is responsible for forecasting, for naming, distribution of warnings for tropical cyclones in the northern Indian Ocean region. So you must have seen whenever a tropical cyclone comes, so it is the responsibility of the IMD to name it, right? So it is responsible for forecasting. IMD provides services not just to India but also the neighboring countries. So it has a lot of weather stations in place, and on the basis of the information received, it provides information to the neighboring countries as well. Now, in collaboration with the Indian Space Research Organization, the IMD also uses the Indian Remote Sensing Series of satellites and the Indian National Satellite Systems for weather monitoring of the Indian subcontinent. So this information is very much crucial for your prelims. Now, coming to the next aspect, it is with respect to, Myanmar has been in news, and we have also seen that a particular northeastern state has been continuously in the news, and that is the Manipur, right? So it becomes really important for us to have a thorough analysis of the borders which India shares with Myanmar. Now, remember that India has a border of around 1,643 kilometers with Myanmar, right? And there are 4 states which share the border. The first is Arunachal, the second is Nagaland, the third is Manipur, and the fourth is Mizoram. So you can see Arunachal shares a land border of 520 kilometers, Nagaland shares around 215 kilometers, Manipur shares 398, and Mizoram shares 510 kilometers. Now, what is important is that there are some tribal groups which are common on both the sides of the border. So one more thing I need to mention here, that we have got some certain states here. So we have got the state of Sagang, right? We have got the Chin, we have got the Kachin, and here we have got the Rakhine state, right? So you have got primarily the 3 states, Kachin, Sagang, and Chin, which share the border with the Indian counterparts. Now, please understand that there are certain tribes which are common on both the sides of the border. For example, you have got the Nagas, which are common to both the sides of the border. There's a particular community in Myanmar known as Zomi community, and it shares tribal relations with the Kukis. Now, why this becomes important is that because we know that we have a confrontation which is going on between the dominant Meiteis of Manipur and the the minority Kukis, and there have been news that Zomi community has been coming into India, right? So that is with respect to this border. So just keep in mind. Now, coming to the next aspect, we have got one of the mines of Hindustan Copper Limited, and over there a particular tragedy has taken place and one person has lost the life. So it becomes important to know about what this Hindustan Copper Mines is all about, Copper Limited is all about. It is a central public sector undertaking under the Ministry of Mines, right? Now, understand, it is the only vertically integrated government-owned copper producer in India. What does it mean? It is the only central public enterprise which has all the processes with it. It looks into the smelting aspect, it looks into the the mining aspect, it looks into the making the final product. So all the vertical components are integrated in this particular CPSE, and that's the reason it becomes really important. It was incorporated in the year 1967 by actually acquiring some of the mines which were operated by the National Mineral Development Corporation. Now, this is headquartered in Kolkata, and it has 4 units across India. The first is the Khetri Copper Complex. Now, this is where the tragedy has taken place. Now, this is in Rajasthan. You have the Indian Copper Complex, which is in the state of Jharkhand. Then you have the Malanjkhand Copper Project, which is in the state of Madhya Pradesh. And then you have got the Taloja Copper project, which is in the state of Maharashtra. So that is what you need to keep in mind. Now, coming to the very important issue, and that is of South China Sea. We all know that the Chinese incursions, Chinese dominance has been increasing in this particular area. So there are certain areas in this map which you should be aware of. For example, we have got the South China Sea. As you can just see in the map, you have got the South China Sea. Now, we have got some island nations all around. So can you just see this line, the red line? This is known as the 9-dash line. Now, the China says that all the area which includes this 9-dash line is a part of its own sovereign territory, and this has been contested by the other countries around in the region. For example, you can see in the map that you have got the Philippines, and you have got the Philippines claim here. So this line, it says that these are the parts of Philippines. Then you have got the Malaysian claim, then you have got the Vietnamese claim. Different countries are claiming their own part. China is the one which is claiming the most of it, and thus you see that there is an overlap of these claims, and this has been raising confrontation. For example, the recent confrontation between China and Philippines, right? So just have this has been in news, so it becomes important. So what you need to keep in mind is some of these special islands. So you have got the Paracel Islands, right? You have got the Spratly Islands, then you have got the Scarborough Shoal, right? So these islands, some of them, Scarborough Shoal, for example, has been, the Philippines says that it belongs to its own territory, while the China says that it belongs to its own territory. What is important is that China has been sort of working in this area and has been reclaiming islands. What does it mean is that it has been constructing artificial islands, and it has been sort of making the navy, that is a plan, People Liberation Army Navy of China, has been sort of making bases on these reclaimed islands, right? And that is something which is a point of concern. So there is also one body, which is the Gulf of Tonkin. You can see this is the Hainan Island of China. This is the Gulf of Tonkin. You have the Gulf of Thailand. Here you have the Malacca Strait, right? Very important. So this is the Malacca dilemma we often talk about, right? So then you have the James Shoal. Just have a good idea about this particular place, because this can be something which can come in the upcoming prelims, and also have a basic idea about the claims which are made by the different countries. So that's all for today. I hope the session was fruitful. All the best.